Namaskar. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner 8 series crashed yesterday. This aircraft was taking off from Ahmedabad to Gatwick Airport in UK. 241 out of 242 passengers died. The number of people who died on ground because this aircraft crashed on ground just outside the airport, the number of people who died on ground is yet, these numbers are yet to be confirmed. Now, why did this aircraft crash? Because Dreamliner, that is especially the 8th series, this is the first fatality that a Boeing Dreamliner 8 series has encountered. There has never been an accident. So then what really happened? This aircraft was registered 2012, so it's not a very old aircraft. 2012 is not an old aircraft in terms of the way you see aircraft and the model. So it's not been a very old aircraft. So then what went wrong? Was it a technical fault? Was it an administrative fault? Was it a pilot error? Was it because of a bird hit? Was it because of an engine failure? What really went wrong? Because when we talk about bird hit, people say that, listen, there has to be smoke. There was no smoke. So is that the way you see bird hit, or when an object enters the aircraft? Is that what happens? So all of this, we thought we will talk to an expert, because I think that's the person who should be answering all these questions. And we have Captain Mohan Ranganathan. Mohan Ranganathan doesn't need an introduction because he's possibly one of the most well-known aviation safety expert in the country. Let's talk to him. And what I did is I actually asked a very basic questions so that as a layman, I understand what exactly happened. Questions that are not very technical, but questions that will give us a perspective of what could have happened. What could have happened yesterday. Let's go in and talk to him. Is aviation safe in India, sir?
I would say no. Standards of pilots and the standards of training have diminished worldwide. If heads don't roll now, and this is not a small accident, it's a huge accident and it's a setback. So any obstacle which penetrates that plate is not supposed to be permitted. But airport authority, due to political pressure, will give NOC to some structure or other. They will not touch somebody who's got a lot of connections and wealth.
Is there a pilot error in this entire?
I wouldn't call it a pilot error. I would call it a human error. What went wrong is, everybody will blame the pilot, but I blame the system.
Sir, thank you so much for joining, and as always, it's so enlightening to have you. Sir, what really went wrong?
What went wrong is, everybody will blame the pilot, but I blame the system. Because if you go through the track record, almost all the fatal accidents we've had in India, most of the major ones are Air India. And the Tatas have taken over. It's 3 years now. But what is worrying is the same set of people have been manning the top positions, except for the expats. And there is no accountability. See, when you have a fatal accident, there should be accountability. You have to find out why it is happening. Now, if it's happening once too often, you just can't say that they'll write it off as pilot error. The reports are cooked up. And there's a lot of manipulation of facts to achieve. Like, I'm sure that in school, you will know what is the end answer that you should get, and you work backward by fudging the figures. And people who've been manning the safety and training and Air India have been fudging the figures for a long, long time. So if heads don't roll now, and this is not a small accident, it's a huge accident and it's a
Two-
setback.
241 people died.
Yeah, and then so many on ground.
Correct.
See, so it's not just Air India. Now, yesterday on that NDTV show that correspondent was showing, he was talking about the building in which the aircraft crashed. He said it's 1+5, the structure, which means 60 feet, a minimum 70 feet high building, 300 meters from the end of the runway, end of the compound wall. So, how did they allow a tall object, and it's an obstacle? Whoever gave the no objection certificate should be held accountable and action should be taken. Yeah. So,
According to rules, sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but according to rules, that particular building was not supposed to be there, isn't it?
I
You
think
can't
so.
have that tall building.
Yeah. You see, the Annex 14, Standard 1, the Volume 1 clearly gives the funnel, the takeoff funnel, and and from the end of the runway, that angle. So any obstacle which penetrates that plate is not supposed to be permitted. But airport authority, due to political pressure, will give NOC to some structure or other. They'll all go around with bulldozer to demolish poor people's apartments and houses, but they will not touch somebody who's got a lot of connections and wealth. So,
Coming back to the aircraft, sir, 787 8 series Dreamliner, one of the best that Boeing has. As of now, this is the first ever accident that has been reported for a Dreamliner. What actually went wrong then?
see, what I suspect, it is not the aircraft. I think it is either bird ingestion, which caused the compressor stall, the loud bang that some couple of passengers reported. Even though a survivor had said 30 seconds after takeoff, there was a loud bang. If birds are ingested, and Ahmedabad is notorious for birds, you can have the mismatch of airflow, which will cause the compressor to stall. And that is the sound they would have heard. And the other thing could be like a foreign object damage. Like, birds flying around, they could have picked up something from the side and flying across. They might have dropped it on the runway or the shoulder of the runway. And that would have been sucked in. So it could be a foreign object damage or bird ingestion, which can cause this. So, and those engines are very powerful. It will suck in anything which is within the area of the airflow.
A bird hit, wouldn't that cause some kind of smoke or some kind of a engine issue? Wouldn't it be visible?
See, if it is a small bird, there will be not much of smoke. By the time it comes out of that huge engine, it would have been cooked completely. And if you look at the video, you don't see that portion where the stall takes place because it could have just been burned. Unless it's a very large flock of birds, you won't get the smoke.
So,
Even for a
one
compressor stall, you can get black smoke. But I didn't see any smoke as such looking at that.
yes, yes, there was no smoke. That is precisely no smoke. As in when the plane went down, there was no smoke. So normally, I was trying to do a little bit of research in a very layman's kind of way. I most of the bird hits, I found that there was some element of smoke that came out of the engine, and here there was no smoke. So that was the question I asked you, sir. Sir, another thing is the landing gear was down.
Yes,
So shouldn't the landing gear be up at that altitude and that speed?
it should be up before you reach 35 feet as per the procedures.
And this was 40 feet.
This was 400 feet.
Oh, 400 feet, I'm sorry. So shouldn't
So
that be up?
Exactly. So, what I suspect is they must have had a compressor stall either due to birds or due to some object being sucked in, and that noise could have startled them, what you call a startle effect. So, when you suddenly hear a noise as you're rotating, and you can be distracted, and he's got a co pilot. Okay, they say he had 1100 hours. Out of that, 200 hours will be on a small Cessna aircraft. So the other 900, how many hours does he have on the Dreamliner is something that you have to check. So if he doesn't have much experience, and if they are not used to, I mean, if they didn't anticipate, when you see a lot of birds, you should be mentally prepared that this can happen. But if you're not prepared for an eventuality, it takes you by surprise. When something like this happens, when you're taken by surprise, what will happen is you may forget a few vital actions, and by the time it is not climbing, and you see the obstacles ahead of you, and you're focused on that, and you forget this. That's exactly what happened in the Mangalore crash when the pilot decided to go around because
Yes.
that ILS structure, which was illegal, it was supposed to be frangible, but they had a concrete structure. So when he saw the huge concrete structure, he tried to go because he knew that he can't stop the aircraft. And the same thing, if they had seen that big building ahead, that hospital building, which appears to be a violation, they would have been focused on that, and nothing else would have registered. When some kind of a startle effect takes over, you're going to be focused on that. And that is what I think a good investigator will. Fortunately, because Boeing is in a controversial position right now, the NTSB will be far more alert than they were in the Mangalore crash because it was not pointing a finger at an American manufactured aircraft. While here, the whole world is looking at it, the first fatal accident for a Dreamliner. Boeing is already facing a lot of technical problems. And they would want to make sure that nothing is swept under the carpet. So, from that point of view, NTSB will be very alert for this crash, unlike the other crashes they've involved themselves in.
Let's take one particular case like we're just discussing. Let's assume that it was a bird hit. If it was a bird hit, sir, what exactly could the captain do when it was taking off and you have a bird hit within 40 seconds, for instance? What are the steps that the captain could have done?
See, when I was part of the Civil Aviation Safety Advisory Council after the Mangalore crash, I was also appointed into the bird committee, and I had brought out a procedure for bird avoidance by pilots. And I had some friends with the bird society, and see, these kites, they all have self-preservation instinct. So close to the ground, no bird or a kite is going to dive down because it's ground. It'll want to get away to escape. So close to the ground, any bird, if it feels an aircraft is coming towards it, will only climb because otherwise it'll crash into the ground. So the way to avoid a bird while flying on takeoff is you have the normal rotation angle. But if you find the bird coming at you, if you dip your nose down slightly, yes, you may not be theoretically correct for the climb angle, but dropping your nose 1 or 2 degrees, what will happen is it's going, and over the wing you have the airflow, the slipstream. Now the bird will be blown off by the slipstream, so you will escape the path of the bird. But on the other hand, if you don't understand what the bird is going to do, if you try to climb also, your engines are so large and the airflow that it sucks is going to be so wide, almost 20 feet diameter, anything in the path will be sucked in. if you're at an altitude like what Sullenberg had, you know, there the birds will dive down because they got plenty of ground, sky behind, below them, and they're not going to try and climb there. So climbing, when you're at altitude, you can avoid a bird. If you're close to the ground, you must dip down, dip the nose slightly to push the birds off. But most of the pilots don't understand that.
Again, a layman's question, sir. Within that aircraft, in that huge aircraft, when you're sitting in the cockpit, so do you actually visually see birds from where you sit?
Yeah, you can. You have a
Even if
clear
it's,
view through the windshield.
so even if
It's
it's a
only a
small bird.
Concorde. That is why in the Concorde, they had the nose dipping down for takeoff because once it gets airborne and it's going supersonic, it'll lift up. So if they had that for the approach, they wouldn't be able to see ahead because the cockpit is so far behind.
Correct.
So,
Correct. So they have the nose down.
yeah.
Ah, okay. Sir, we have developed, I mean, our technology has developed, the aircraft, as the aeronautical technology has developed. Sir, we still have this basic problem of bird hit. Why is that so, sir? Why are we not able to create a methodology or a technology which can avoid bird hits, which can ensure that a plane doesn't need to worry about birds anymore?
See, there's one thing I don't know what is the SOP that Air India or other airlines in India follow now. But when I used to fly here, we had a system where I had made the SOP for Sahara when I was flying with them and SpiceJet, where I had insisted that even if in clear weather, keep the weather radar on. You know, the radar frequency disturbs the birds and they move away. There was a study done about that. So if you keep your weather radar on throughout for all takeoffs and landings, the chance of avoiding a bird strike is very good. But if you don't, then you've got to depend on your eyes.
Assuming it is not a bird hit, what
Okay.
else could it be?
It could be, like if the birds which are flying around, they pick some object from the side of the runway and they drop it on the runway shoulder or the runway, then the engine can pick up that object, like what happened to the Concorde. You know, the previous aircraft which took off, some part dropped out, and these engines picked up, and that is how the Concorde crashed. Now, it'll be interesting if the investigators ask for details of which flight took off before. Yeah. So that'll be or if there are strong winds, it can blow objects onto the runway. So I don't think the winds were very strong, but it can happen. Like if there is an aircraft which is turning off with high thrust, it can blow sand and other things across. So that can happen. So it could be a foreign object which had been sucked in, which can cause the same kind of damage.
Sir, I'm sorry, I'm asking you very basic questions so that normal audience understands what the situation is. Sir, how big or small need the object be for it to cause a crash?
The object can be even about 1 inch diameter.
This much, and that can cause a crash.
Yeah.
That's the. Is there any technology that's been designed or being invented that can kind of ensure that the engine doesn't get, engine doesn't blow up
They do
with this?
have, no, it doesn't, only the blades will be affected. It may not be the whole engine. You see, they are turning at such a high RPM, and you have the fan blades. You see, it's not just the core section of the engine, you got the wide fan section. So it is the fan blades which will be bent or affected, which causes a mismatch in airflow. And that could cause that noise. But it will not be a loss of thrust because of that.
Let's take a second scenario. The
Yeah.
nose was towards it. It was as if it was going to land. The flight, the nose was tipping up. The landing gear was still down. Sir, what else could have gone wrong? Is there any other possibility other than a hit or a object going inside the engine or a bird hit? Or is there any other possibility that you can envisage?
See, one of the features of all the Boeing design, right from the first 737, there's a feature that Boeing has, the stabilizer. See, smaller aircrafts have elevators, and large high speed aircrafts, the elevators are small. So, what happens is the whole tail plane will move. The stabilizer is strong and big, and you change the angle of the stabilizer to compensate for the small elevator. And that elevator stabilizer control is on the control wheel of the pilot on the Boeing. So if when you use the stabilizer, when you want to get your nose up, then you got to get the stabilizer up so that it lifts up. And so using the stab trim, one of the old manuals used to have that. All the new manuals, Boeing has deleted a number of lines. And one was that fly in trim speed. So the aircraft flies the speed at which it is trimmed. So when he loses an engine or loss of thrust and he's trying to climb, if you're trying to use the elevator at slow speed, you will find that the control force is heavy. So the tendency is to use the stabilizer to relieve the thing. But when you release the pressure, the aircraft will seek its trim speed. Suppose you've trimmed back, the stabilizer will lift up the nose, because of
Okay.
the stab trim setting. So that is why the nose is high. So when he is trying to gain height and the speed is dropping because the thrust is already gone. And looking at the final stages, from the time he started dipping down, it appears to be the aircraft was stalling.
If assuming, I just want to, what I'm trying to kind of figure out is, sir, is there any way we could have saved that 241 lives if there were no buildings, for instance, in the front,
Yeah.
in the path? Would that save? Would that help?
Well, if the area beyond the building was clear, and if the building was also not officially, it's an obstacle. If the landing gear was up, he would have had a better climb gradient initially and also a longer glide distance without the drag of the gear. So the reason why it was shallow and it was sinking was the drag caused by the gear. So
Sir,
if the gear was not there, there is a possibility it could have gone beyond that building, and if the area was clear, they could have even crashed on the flat ground.
that would have saved lives.
Yeah, it
Sir,
would have saved the people who were on ground who died, and also many who were on board.
correct, absolutely. Sir, let's assume that like you said it right in the onset. You said that there is no way that we always tend to blame the pilot, and it is not the pilot, it is the system that's at fault. Completely appreciate that point, sir. But is there still? I ask you, is there a pilot error in this entire
I wouldn't call it a pilot error. I would call it a human error. You
human
know,
error?
uh,
Okay, can
because
you can you can you tell me the distinction between the two, sir?
okay, if you go through the lead investigator of the Air France crash in Toronto in 2005, the journalist asked him, "Is it a pilot error?" And the answer he gave was, he says, "I don't call it a pilot error. He's a human. And it is a human who has not, I look at what makes the pilot do what he's not trained to do." So, in a situation that was confronted by this crew, have they done similar exercise on the simulator? Have they been trained for that? See, when you have dual engine failures at 3,000 feet and things like that, has any airline even thought of doing a dual engine failure on rotation? So if you have been trained to do something and then you make an error, you can call it a pilot error. Here's a situation where he has not been trained to do this. So, like what that Real Lebasa, the chief investigator, said, I look at what made the pilot do what he's not trained to do. So that is a way a good investigator should look at. Not, you see, the Annex 13 clearly says if you have an accident, investigation, identify what caused the accident, and prevent a recurrence in training and safety standards. Here, if you go through most of the accidents in India, it is almost a repetition of the same thing again and again. Yeah? And people who've been heads of safety or operation or training, they continue there. Nobody is blamed. The poor pilot is blamed.
When you say dual engine failure, but how do we visually kind of figure out whether there is a dual engine failure or whether a single engine has failed? Because obviously, if there's a bird hit, then you have one engine failure, isn't it?
See, if it is a one engine failure, any aircraft is certified, all your takeoffs, the weights are based on losing one engine on takeoff. You can climb out safely, clearing all the obstacles. The way the takeoff performance is calculated is after takeoff, what they call the takeoff segment, you get your gear up before you reach 35 feet. And then 35 feet to 400 feet is called the second segment, which you require a gradient of 2.8%, which is factored by another 0.7 if you are. And all these tracks are cleared by 35 feet by the aircraft, even on single engine. Only if you can do that, you can take off with that weight. Anytime your gradient cannot match that, then you will reduce the takeoff weight. That's why, depending on the temperature, sometimes you get they tell you the flight is full, but you may find some seats are empty and you'll think that they are bluffing. It's because at high temperature and high altitude runways, they'll have to go for every takeoff is based on losing an engine on takeoff. When you have two engines, you can climb out comfortably, but the weight calculation is based on this.
Oh, so what you're technically saying, sir, that you never can make out whether there is a one engine flying or two engines in operations. You can never actually make out visually, can you?
You can make out visually, like in the older aircrafts, by the way it will swing to one side. And you correct it and bring but the modern, like a Dreamliner or a 320 Airbus aircrafts, it has auto compensation like 777, the fly-by-wire aircraft. They automatically correct for an engine failure, the swing. So the pilot, really speaking, will not feel it. While the older aircraft, because you are taking the corrective steps, you know exactly which engine is gone. In a modern aircraft, it takes a few minutes to realize that one engine is gone.
So, other than modern technology being of help, in such cases, it is actually kind of caused this fatality, isn't it, sir? Had the pilot known that there is one engine that has failed, he could have immediately switched on to the next engine, like you rightly said.
See, that is what FAA had also identified more than 15 years back, that the manual flying skills of pilots have diminished considerably because too much dependence on automation.
Let me ask you a broader question now, sir. Are our flights safe? Is aviation safe? in our country? Are we doing the right things? Are we ensuring that our planes are safe? Are we ensuring that our airports are good? Are we ensuring our runways are fine? Are we ensuring that the surroundings are kept according to the international norms? Is aviation safe in India, sir?
If you ask me for a frank answer, I would say no. The best example is Calicut or Mangalore. If you take
Yes.
Calicut, you 2020, like after the Mangalore crash, when we did the audit and inspection of Calicut, we wrote that it doesn't meet the standards, it doesn't have a runway and safety area, it doesn't have the side strip, which is supposed to be 140 meters, it's only 75 meters. We don't have the 300-meter runway and safety area on both ends. And what did they say? It'll be done. And Scindia formed a committee which identified that these safety areas are not there, so reduce the runway length. So airlines go crying to them, saying that they'll have to reduce payload, they have to offload passengers. So he gives time. What happens is just like the DGCA gave time for the flight and duty time to be, they said you implement it by July. What about fatigue? It is not a marketing tool. A human is a human. So just like that, the airports do not meet the standards. Many of the airports do not meet the standards. Like Bombay High Court had given orders for demolition of so many obstacles in Bombay. Have they done that? You're in Bombay. See, more than 100 obstacles, they are still left to chance. So if a crash takes place, will the judge take the responsibility? Will the DGCA take the responsibility? So I would say that safety is only a 6-letter word in India. It doesn't exist.
What has the quality of pilots in the world in general and India in particular, have the quality of pilots increased? Are they better now, or are they turning more mechanical driven, electronic driven, auto driven? How would you rate a pilot today, sir, from
I would
possible
say
profiling?
the standards of pilots and the standards of training have diminished worldwide. It is not the same quality as the pilots from my generation or even the next gen. Today, they are all dependent on auto flight system, and they don't think they fly mechanically. And like we used to be trained with the concept, you fly the plane, don't let the plane fly you. Today, I can tell you that 30% of the pilots may do it, but 70% are totally slaves to automation. And if you look at the experience level, take for instance, they fly on minimum. They want to fill the aircrafts are coming in at a large, fast pace. You've got pilots who come from the flying club, flying a small aircraft, 200 hours, they come with a CPL, and they do the minimum training, and they are cleared as a co-pilot. So you may have a captain who is a new captain with a new co-pilot, and the total cockpit time will be worldwide for wide body. They don't let you fly as a captain in a wide body unless you have 6,000 plus hours and 3,000 hours on that type. While in India, you will find a captain will be 25 years old with maybe minimum 2,500 hours and a co-pilot with 200 hours. So if you think you're safe with that and who's dependent on autopilot, God help you.
Sir, just to conclude our conversation so that I and my viewers have understood it right, what you're saying, sir, is the Dreamliner per se, 787, the 8 series, it's a fairly good aircraft. What we are saying is, sir, that the chances are that what we see it, the way we see it, at least as of now, is it's possibly a bird hit or any object that must have hit the the engines. That's what we are saying. We are saying that the probability of the fact that the landing gear was not pulled up is because the pilot must have been stunned at that point in time, because he saw buildings right in front of him which shouldn't have been there actually, and therefore he hasn't pulled up the landing gear. We shouldn't see anything beyond that, is what we are saying. Fourth, what we are saying is, sir, what you said, and I think it was very profound, that it's a, if at all it's a human error and not a pilot's error per se, because somewhere down the line what he didn't do, or what he did, what that which was not trained, which he was not trained for. So that's your point number 4 you made, sir. And point number 5 you're making is, sir, that there is a possibility, if we had a clearer ground in front of him, if we had followed the norms to the T and we had a clearer ground in front of him and no tall buildings, possibly the flight would have landed in some form or another. Maybe there would have been some injuries and stuff, but it could have saved some lives. That's what we are saying, sir.
Yeah, take the Capt crash thing. Only 20 people died, even though it went over the cliff and crashed into the thing. It broke. Only 20 people died. You know, it was not a catastrophe like what happened in Mangalore.
And the last thing you said, and that I thought was very important, is that the quality of pilots that we are seeing worldwide, not just India, worldwide, the quality of pilots, because of the dependence on technology, because of this autopilot kind of a generation that has been created, the quality of pilots has deteriorated. So that's how we would sum up, would we, sir? Or anything that I've missed out, anything that you would like to add more?
No, that's fine. And then, most important, you need a regulator who's a regulator, not a facilitator.
The regulator factor, yes, who could actually ensure that, once they identify the problem, and then they have the where and means to correct it. Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you so much for talking to me. As always, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.